Hi, so this is not a new video, it's an edited re-upload of a video that I released last week that unfortunately got hit with several copyright claims, just as it was about to hit 20k. I filed a dispute since everything about the video was in line with fair use laws, and some of the segments that HBO claimed included footage from the game, but they still rejected it. So to avoid the risk of a copyright strike, I delisted the old video and have significantly edited this release. It's practically the same video, just with certain clips taken out, and I've overlaid footage from the games throughout most of the video now. It sucks because the original video was one of my best performing videos in a while, and this re-upload probably won't get the same traction, but it is what it is, I guess. And thank you to everyone who supported the original video.
Ah, chills. Literal chills.
It was number 5. Number 5 killed my brother.
Oh my god, I forgot about that part.
When The Last of Us Part 2 launched back in 2020, the reaction to it was incredibly divisive, as it was a very ambitious title that tried to tackle a lot with its darker themed story, and for some people it just didn't work. I've come to terms with Part 2, as I recently did a retrospective on the game, and at the end of that video I said that I was very intrigued to see how Season 2 of HBO's Adaptation would go about handling that game's story, with hopes that maybe the TV format could fix some of the narrative issues it had. What I don't think anyone expected was that Season 2, despite making a few decent changes here and there, would be far worse than the game in so many ways. And unlike the polarized reception to the game, the response to the show's drastic decline in quality seems to be unanimous across the board this time, even from people who loved the game. I should also quickly note that most of this review was written before the final episode premiered, as I didn't expect it to be an episode that would suddenly bring everything together and fix the narrative problems, because I'm familiar with the game's structure. I'll add my thoughts on the season finale at the end of the video, or I'll weave them into other parts of my critique depending on how bad it turns out. Oh boy, it was fucking bad.
See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.
Season 2 suffers from atrocious pacing issues, bizarre mischaracterizations, and like the writers have no respect for the audience's intelligence and patience. Even divorced from the source material, Season 2 is arguably worse than some of the lowest points of The Walking Dead. Like, I think I'd rather rewatch the fucking slog of a farm storyline than this.
He's not going for it.
We need live bait.
Ah! It's over. It's over. It's not getting any better. This show's done. It's ruined. It's gone. There's no saving it. This is the most legitimate reason you could ever have for leaving the show entirely. Let's just repel the Asian kid down. Nothing could possibly go wrong. What if Glenn died? Glenn was a kind fellow, and through his extremely preventable death, he will always be remembered as someone who treated people very well.
Now, while Neil Druckmann receives quite a lot of hate and criticism regarding this franchise, watching through this season confirmed my suspicion that he isn't really at fault for the show's severe drop in quality, or even the issues Season 1 had. That blame deserves to be aimed at showrunner and lead writer Craig Mazin. One thing I noticed when watching the promo interviews for the first season was that Neil basically said that almost all the changes made in the show were Craig's ideas, like making Sam deaf, which I felt was actually a detrimental change because it robbed his character of any agency in the story, and made him completely useless without Henry. Yes, Craig, A Quiet Place was a cool movie, I know. But it was still extremely evident that Neil was heavily involved in the adaptation process during Season 1, because despite it being a reinterpretation, it still felt like a faithful adaptation of the game where it mattered most. With Season 2, however, it's clear that Druckmann was nowhere near as involved, and that Craig Mazin is running the show, because holy shit is it clear that Mazin fundamentally does not understand the story, or the character of Ellie at all. And yes, I'm going to address Bella Ramsey's rather terrible performance this season as fairly as I can. And I must be honest, it's kind of hard to articulate concisely what the issue is with Season 2, because it's just a whole host of really poor writing decisions that cascade into each other. And I honestly think the mishandling of the story just got worse with each progressing episode. Craig?
We have to tell the best television show that we can, but we also know that the whole point of telling The Last of Us as a television show is to honor The Last of Us. If you lose sight of that, then, yes, you will be properly screamed at.
So he's an idiot.
Now, before I start tearing apart this clusterfuck of a season, there are a few things that are genuinely quite good about this season. Pedro Pascal once again does a terrific job as Joel with the minimal amount of screen time he's given. I thought it was a great idea to show Joel and Dina spending time together, and the little misdirect at the start of the episode with the "Hey kiddo" line before seeing Dina was a nice bit of writing. And I liked the idea of Dina being on patrol with Joel instead, as this ended up fixing one of the more contrived plot points of the game, where Joel and Tommy casually revealed their names to a group of armed strangers. Having Dina unknowingly reveal Joel's name to Abby because she didn't know Joel had rescued her made a lot more sense, given how cautious and mistrusting Joel is characterized as being in both iterations of the character. Caitlin Devo gives a really great performance as this version of Abby, and she stood out as one of the better parts of this season, despite how little screen time she ended up getting. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be watching an adaptation of Part 2 where my reaction to the theatre scene was, "Thank God, Abby is finally here," I would have laughed and called you insane, but here we are. I didn't find her lack of physical resemblance to Abby all that distracting, and it was kind of funny and sad how Neil and Craig gave these long-winded rambles about why Caitlin doesn't match Abby's physicality, when I think we all know it's just because she's an incredibly busy actress and there was no time in her schedule to bulk up.
Oh, it's funny. I have waited
Just shut the fuck up and do it already.
Isabella Merced as Dina is probably the one shining light throughout this train wreck of a TV show. She brings so much charm and fire to the role of Dina, and I'm willing to go as far as to say she carries most of the show, both because she's a fantastic actress and because of how she's been written by Mason. She inadvertently, I think, winds up feeling like the main character for most of the show. Which brings me to one of the biggest issues with Season 2, and where Craig Mazin seems to have a fundamental misunderstanding of the games, and that's with the characterization of Ellie, that bleeds into Bella Ramsey's extremely unconvincing performance as this character. She isn't awful all the time, but I did find it interesting that the one episode where she was fairly good was episode 6, that was written and directed by Neil Druckmann.
There's no preparation for, well, I'm not very good at preparation for myself anyway. I don't really prepare, probably, at all, but as much as I should. Although, I think it kind of works, but,
The core issue is that Mazin is still writing Ellie as if she's a child, which is why Bella is still acting like a child throughout most of the show. And for some reason, he seems to think that Ellie is dumb and incompetent.
Non-school oriented.
fuck you, I'm in school, let me help.
Ellie's super smart, what? The fuck? Characterization of Ellie being dumb is weird.
Constantly throughout the show, we see other characters highlight Ellie's incompetence, and Mazin seems to be reducing her character to that of a petulant child, while taking a lot of her personality traits from the game and then giving them to Dina. Dina is the one who knows how to plan a trip. Dina knows about surviving. Dina knows how to read maps. Dina knows how to count how many infected are in the area. Meanwhile, Ellie is apparently just a dumb idiot that runs in guns blazing, and yet isn't shown to be a particularly great fighter. Mazin seems to want to reduce Ellie to being this violent sociopath, as seen in Season 1 with her torturing that one infected. But it doesn't work because she isn't shown to be a particularly great fighter, again, unlike Ellie in the game. Like, why didn't she grab the gun off the WLF soldier? She could have done some serious damage with an assault rifle. Why didn't she grab the gun? Craig? Now, Ellie in the game definitely has a fiery nature to her personality, but she never came across as dumb like she does in the show. She's shown in the game to be an extremely capable survivor, which is why she works on patrol in Jackson. And while she does willingly put herself in harm's way, it's not until much later in the story where she becomes more reckless about it, which was to highlight how badly her desire for revenge was affecting her judgment. I mean, Dina and Jesse in the game weren't that worried about Ellie venturing off on her own because they knew she was capable, whereas in the show they seem to constantly criticize her capabilities, and she's constantly portrayed as having almost zero survival skills.
Look for the devil's gonna find you. And Abby seemingly is not like Ellie, in that Abby is incredibly competent.
It then doesn't help that Ellie's characterization and portrayal is frustratingly inconsistent. She spends a lot of the show still acting incredibly aloof, like a child that's on vacation, and the way her relationship with Dina has been mishandled, Ellie feels like she's the happiest she's ever been a lot of the time. Like, why is Dina having to convince Ellie to go through with their mission to hunt down Abby? Craig?
What are we supposed to do now? Nothing. I just need to rest for a second. Are you fucking kidding? How long have you known? I was late a few weeks ago. A few weeks? We could have still turned back. I didn't know. I wasn't sure, okay? I didn't want to be a burden.
Well, you're a burden now, aren't you?
You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have come. I shouldn't have dragged you here. You're having a fucking baby. What am I doing? Dina, do you want to go back? I'll take you back. You don't need to do this with me.
And then even when Ellie is meant to be conveying those darker feelings of vengeance, it just never works because unfortunately, Bella Ramsey just cannot convincingly emote the expressions the script wants her to convey.
And if we run into wolves that weren't in Jackson?
What is this look supposed to mean, Craig? That, and she just doesn't look intimidating in her physical stature in the same way Ellie in the game does. And the rather bland cinematography isn't doing her any favors. The basement scene in episode 5 just did not work, both because of Bella and the inconsistent characterization of Ellie, who literally moments beforehand was shown to be incompetent in her pursuit of Nora, even being taken out by a chair like a Looney Tunes skit. The inconsistency in Ellie's character was made even worse in the last episode, and it really highlighted how Mason has no idea what the fuck he's trying to say about Ellie. The scene in the theatre with Dina was just genuinely confusing because this version of Ellie seemed more upset over the revelation that Joel killed Abby's dad, instead of in the game where it was clear that she was horrified by what she had done in order to make Nora talk, likely because she had probably already worked out why Abby killed Joel, or she just didn't care. In the game, Ellie seems to be trying really hard to be as emotionally disconnected from the violence she's committing, something that Joel had more or less perfected. But in this moment, we can see just from her body language and facial expressions that she's realizing that she's not like Joel, no matter how hard she's trying to be. The show's version has Bella play the scene almost devoid of any emotion whatsoever, almost as if to imply she was numb to the violence she had just committed and had become like Joel. And the writing throughout the season had been trying to convey how similar the two of them supposedly are. But this idea is contradicted like 5 minutes later when Ellie suddenly decides she cares about the scars, and Jesse had to stop her from engaging with the WLF that would have killed her. And Joel would have done the exact same thing Jesse did, and he would have said the same thing, that this wasn't their war to fight. You can't have it both ways, Craig. I must commend Craig though, because he managed to make Ellie genuinely unlikable this season. Especially during her fight with Jesse, where she just came across as a hypocritical, petulant child. She seemed more upset that she had to watch Joel die, instead of actually being upset that he was gone.
Ellie points out to Jesse, in a crucial moment, that this concept of community is the problem.
Let me tell you about my community. My community was beaten to death in front of me while I was forced to fucking watch.
What Ellie had was Joel, and he was killed. That's who she cares about. And the idea that Jesse thinks he's special or better because he cares about his community is the problem.
Oh my god, what are you talking about, Craig? Then in the last episode, they took what was Ellie's arguably most disturbing kill in the game, and then they turn it into an accident. Like, yeah, Ellie is horrified when she learns Mel is pregnant in the game too, but it felt so much worse because of how callously she had killed her. Ellie doesn't even seem fully committed to her desire for revenge, since she's shown as wanting to give up twice, and had to be talked back into it by Dina. They even took what would have been a perfect opportunity for Ellie to express her rage and grief in episode 3, but they gave that moment to Seth instead?
What are you doing?
Another glaring issue that Season 2 has is with its structure, pacing, and how they choose when to reveal certain pieces of information to the audience. Now, the game had similar structural and pacing issues too, but it feels like a masterpiece compared to how Craig Mazin has mishandled the story. When Abby just fully revealed her motivations for killing Joel in episode 2, I was staring at the screen in disbelief that they would reveal such crucial information so early. The game deliberately withheld this for a long time to make you feel in sync with Ellie as she starts to care less and less about the why, every enemy in her path becoming a mere annoyance as she's consumed by her quest for retribution. The only way it made sense for me to reveal Abby's motive straight away was if they were going to weave her and Ellie's stories together more organically, going back and forth between perspectives regularly. That would have been an interesting idea, Craig. But no. Instead, the show decides to follow the structure of the game and focus primarily on Ellie, interspersed with these side stories focusing on the WLF and the Seraphites that are honestly really fucking boring. Craig. This was a similar issue the first season had. That whole Hunter storyline was a boring attempt at humanizing a faction that didn't really need to be humanized. Their role in the story was to be obstacles for Ellie and Joel, and highlight how dangerous the world is outside of the quarantine zones. I also said in my video on the first 2 episodes that having Jackson be attacked by the Horde felt like it added nothing but spectacle for the sake of it, and ended up damaging and undermining what was meant to be the weight of Joel's demise. With Jackson also being attacked, that loss loses so much significance because he may as well have just been another casualty in the Horde attack. They also ruin a lot of the story's tension by revealing things to the audience ahead of Ellie and Dina. In episode 3, which felt largely like filler, they introduced the Seraphites and established how they communicate with whistling, removing all the tension from the scene later in episode 5, since we as the audience are waiting for that whistle that means the group has been spotted. Whereas in the game, we organically learned about this with Ellie when she's ambushed in the woods. And it's not as if the scene where Ellie and Dina discover all those Scar corpses wouldn't have been effective without that intro scene. Hell, I'd argue it would have been even stronger without it because we'd be just as confused as they feel, and the sight of a dead child shouldn't need a backstory to be upsetting. They also ruin all the tension surrounding the WLF by revealing at the end of this episode that they are literally an army, instead of doing it more organically like in the game, where Ellie and Dina are ambushed and they then had to fight their way through the backstreets as a number of patrols began closing in on them. And my god, this show wastes so much time by focusing on these flashbacks of Isaac that make no sense being in Ellie's half of the story. Not to mention I could not take this character seriously because all I could see was the mom from the Ted TV show.
What the fuck?
Oh my god.
You guys said you'd understand. That was before we knew how fucked up it was. You've never been to war. Things happen. Not that. No. Why the fuck would you jack off a dog?
Whose dog was it?
For a show that's already severely limited by its runtime of only 7 episodes, it's baffling that they felt these scenes were in any way necessary, as all they really did was ruin the pacing. Someone on Twitter worked out that Ellie's story in Seattle was condensed down into essentially 90 minutes in the show, when in the game her journey took players the better part of 12 hours to get through. They even added an incredibly out-of-place scene in the finale, where Ellie ends up washing ashore on the Seraphite Island, very conveniently right next to the boat that she fell out of. She's then captured by Scars and is almost killed when they hear the air raid siren, and then they just decide to leave her, and then Ellie just leaves the island and carries on back to the aquarium.
That's still something.
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
I know that in earlier versions of the game, Ellie was meant to end up on the Seraphite Island, but this was cut when the scope of the game had to be reduced from 5 days to 3, because originally part 2 was going to be 5 days to symbolize the 5 stages of grief. This is an interesting idea, but it makes no sense and serves no purpose in this TV adaptation that has an even more reduced scope than the game.
So originally in the game, something most people don't know, is that we were going to do an entire sequence with Ellie landing on Scar Island. So it was really exciting to get an opportunity to flirt with that again.
We just get to see how chilling it is to be surrounded by everybody that's trying to exact violence, including children.
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
Now, The Walking Dead had pacing issues too, but that was mostly just boring padding that a decent fan edit could cut out without compromising the overall story. That show managed to get away with veering away from the comics and then weaving back into them. The Last of Us Season 2, on the other hand, makes so many fundamental changes to the core story that it's honestly really jarring when it suddenly decides to veer back and try to recreate scenes from the game one-to-one, because almost all of the emotional context of those scenes from the game is missing in the show. Even the one good episode this season suffers from glaring pacing issues and honestly ruins the tragedy of their estrangement and fleeting reconciliation. In the game, Ellie travels all the way back to Salt Lake City Hospital when she's 17, because apparently traveling in the second game wasn't perilous anymore. It's here where she finally confronts Joel about the lie he told regarding the Fireflies, and this leads to their estrangement for the next 2 years. In the show, Ellie and Joel go on her first patrol when she's 19, where they encounter a Jackson resident named Eugene who has just been infected. Despite promising Ellie that they would take him back to Jackson to say goodbye to his wife Gail, the most annoying character in this season, Joel instead coldly follows protocol and executes Eugene. Ellie then spitefully calls out Joel's lie when they get back to Jackson, and this leads to their estrangement, which is only for a few weeks as far as I could tell. They then cram together Ellie confronting Joel about the lie and the porch scene from the end of the game into one scene, and it just doesn't work, because there isn't that much needed time between Ellie learning the truth and then finally being open to forgiving Joel. It doesn't even end with their heartbreaking goodbyes to each other.
Okay. I'll see you around.
Yep.
I did like one new thing that was added, and that was a callback to a flashback at the start of the episode, where Joel's father laments about his failings as a father, and then Joel says the exact same thing to Ellie. It was a powerful moment.
You know, when it's your turn, I hope you do a little better than me.
Sometimes, Neil. But they also ruined one of the better narrative devices in Ellie's story, where she plays the song Future Days at key points in the story. In the game, Joel plays this to her at the start of the story, and it becomes the anchor point of their relationship. There's a weight every time you hear Ellie play it after Joel is gone. Like, during this scene, Dina walks in on Ellie playing it, and she brushes her off, and then she plays Take Me On to change the subject. In the show, she just plays Take Me On for no reason. The first time we even hear Future Days is in episode 5 when Ellie finally plays it, but there's no emotional context to it because we don't see the scene where Joel plays it to her until the next episode. And Craig originally wanted Ellie to play something else in this scene, and Neil had to convince him otherwise? Did you even play the game, Craig?
And then, first of all, credit to Neil, because there were a lot of different options here. And I was sort of going down a different path of what Ellie would play. But Neil made a great argument that shorter is better, because we've already seen Ellie play a full song, and it's not like she's playing two in one here. And that this phrase would have a deeper meaning. And that was absolutely the right call on both sides of it.
So he's an idiot.
There is a lot more that I could say about this train wreck of an adaptation, and I'm sure people out there are going to do video essays much longer than this on how badly Craig Mazin butchered the story. What do you mean you need 3 seasons now, Craig? It's almost impressive how drastic a drop in quality this season has been, especially compared to season 1 that most people seem to love, but it feels like even people who didn't play the game hated this season too. There wasn't much that worked, outside of some good performances from pretty much everyone except Bella Ramsey, which I hate to say, although I don't even think that Kaylee Spaney would have been able to save the god-awful handling of Ellie's characterization. Probably would have been a lot more emotive though. I have very low expectations for season 3 now, but it will probably be a lot more watchable with Caitlin Dever helming the show instead, even if the writing is as terrible as this season. So yeah, this has been my thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2. I was never a particularly huge fan of the game, but it honestly feels like a genuine masterpiece now when compared to this so-called adaptation.